Welcome back to the Rebel's Edge, folks, where we've got a stock that's up 180%, and that's the stock. We'll have that for you, and the unusual activity that led to this takeover on the Rebel's Edge. Bang! Welcome back, folks. It's Monday, the 22nd of April, and he is still Pete Najarian over there.
I still am.
Still is. And I'm back from Long Beach, and what an exciting thing. We'll tell you about it later, folks. But the Long Beach Grand Prix, wow. Lots to share with you about that and how Stingray Rob did, Pete.
How about Snoop Dogg? Any Snoop Dogg sightings?
No, but Snoop and Dre had to be nearby.
Yeah.
And yeah, we'll have more updates on that. I got to do Charles Payne's show from the studio in LA, Pete, on Friday. And then Larry Kudlow calls and he wants to talk to me from the track. And so I said, I got to find a quiet spot.
Yeah. Is there one? I've been there. Those are loud, man.
They are. But Pete, they have, as you know, multi-million-dollar semis that are decked out like, million-dollar RVs. So those teams travel in style. Let me tell you that.
Yeah. They deserve it, though. It's tough work, man.
It really is. There's a lot of sitting around, but there's also a lot of really scary and really exciting stuff. But we'll tell you about that. Let's dive in, Pete, to the Rebel's Edge, starting with Macro Minute. So I'm going to say here, Pete, I asked Jared because I wanted to show people the PCE because this is that inflation log since March, as you see there. Since March of 21, they're saying, well, it's not going up as fast as it was prior, but it's not going back down to where it is or where it was prior either. So I'm going to say Macro Minute, Pete. I'm going to say the PCE, and I'm going to say we've got Google, Microsoft, Meta, Tesla, all coming out with earnings. What do you got?
Huge lineup of earnings. You're right. Those are the big names. There's plenty other names as well that are going to be coming out. So I think all of that, you're right. You encapsulated the entire thing. I would say this. The PCE is still the biggest news out there to me because that is obviously everybody knows it because the Fed has told us this is their favorite tool to look at when they're talking about, all right, what does inflation really look like? This is what they look to. And so that's going to come Friday. We've got the whole week to look forward to this, but it's going to be pretty interesting, John, to see exactly where we are because I'm still seeing as sticky as ever, if not maybe the possibility of maybe even sort of a lift. So we'll have to see how this whole thing works, but we're nowhere close to that 2% just yet. That's for sure.
Nope. And really, Pete, there's nothing they could do to drive us to 2% in the short term. Long term, yes. Short term, no. And the pain would be excruciating if they tried to do that. They know that. Even Austin Goolsbee, Pete, this guy was, of course, under President Obama, and I'm not a huge fan, but even he had to come out and say, you know what? Might not be any cuts at all this year based on the moves of inflation that we're not seeing enough in the relaxation of inflation.
People don't know how shocking that is for him to have to say that, John, because in his deep down in his soul, he's as hard left as they get, and he does not want to have to say that. So I'm proud of the fact that as a Chicagoan, he was willing to at least go there and be honest.
Yeah. Well, now we're going to be honest about a couple of sectors, Pete, or at least one sector that's part of Fantastic Futures.
Fantastic Futures.
And I'm going to say, Pete, it's the metals because, oh my gosh, silver and gold. Yukon Cornelius. Yukon Cornelius, from those of you who remember that cartoon, Christmas cartoon, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer or some such, he couldn't be sadder today, Pete, because silver's down over 5% and gold's down 2.5%. And they're both looking like they're in the midst of a somewhat minor correction so far. But for silver, another day like this, and it's 10%.
Yeah. Well, they've been ripping to the upside, as we both know, especially gold. Gold has had a really incredible run to the upside. But at some point, people finally say, all right, enough is enough. I've moved around, and we'll have to see if this is sustainable, if they actually do continue to sell out of this and kind of press those back down. Jon, I know we talk about it all the time. I got to hit it again because it's at an all-time high again. Cocoa, every single day. I mean, we talk about this one, and people just have to understand because it is multi-purpose, and it has to do with water. It has to do with demand, all of those things. Up 180%. Think how many stocks out there are up 180% year to date, or at least still are there. This thing just keeps on going to the upside, Jon. By the way, the 1 year, it's up 300%. So I would say let's keep an eye on cocoa because there's a lot to it, whether it's medicinal or whether you get it for the sweet side of things. It is something that absolutely just continues to climb to the upside. I would encourage people to go out there and take a look at the charts. Just take a look at what this thing looks like. You'll be shocked.
Well, of course, I agree with you, Pete. And in fact, one of you, our valued viewers and clients, shot us something saying we didn't understand about lithium, Pete. We don't understand how important it is and all that kind of stuff. And I said, supply and demand. And I said, supply and demand is something you can screw with it, but ultimately, if you have too much supply, prices are going down. If you have too much demand, prices are going up. It's as simple as that, folks. Now,
and when you don't have demand, Jon, when you don't have demand, and anybody who's seen the pictures of all of the different EV vehicles that are out there, right, that are sitting there in parking lots, I think we were pretty balls on right on that one, Jon.
Yeah, I agree. Well, anyway, we do appreciate all the comments, even if we disagree with them, folks, because, we can disagree and still have a good conversation. So I don't think that particular viewer was completely wrong. I just think that it is supply and demand that drive prices. And again, governments can interfere, wars and things like that can change things in the short term, but ultimately it is supply and demand. All right, Pete, let's start with Matterport today, MTTR, because I remember you and I being on TV, and I remember somebody on the panel saying, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Oh my God, you can wander around your home with your phone and basically it'll do 3D mapping of your home. And I said, who's going to do that unless they're selling their home? Nobody. Who wants people to know what's in their home, how many bedrooms there are? Is this like to help burglars or what is this? And, it's something that's, it's a great tool when you want to sell. It is not a great tool for the rest of the time you're living in that home, but you can use it also in offices and all that kind of stuff. I get that it had an application or something, but Pete, this stock was $25 at the time and it had a little pop when it was mentioned, but then it slammed down and it hasn't made any recovery. In fact, today it's up 180% after it traded down to $2. So look at that chart. I mean, where did it close Friday? $1.74. Where is it today? $4.75. Wow, what a rip-roaring success. Actually, it was a rip-roaring success for us because what did we have, Pete? Unusual activity in February. There it is. Unusual activity. October 3 calls. How did they do with the stock now at $5 and a part of a takeover? I'd say they did pretty well. But other than that, not a great real outperformance out of this stock.
No. And the reason it's popped is because of CoStar. They've got a bid. They're going to go out there. This is a real estate company, online real estate. And this is what fits into what they're doing. But boy, are they getting a discount, Jon. If this was a $36 stock that now got all the way down to $2 and they're willing to buy it for $5, I would say that they're getting a pretty good deal on the pricing model of what they're doing on this whole thing. So being up 175% can be a little misleading to some degree. But all that being said, like you said, the unusual options once again, and they gave us in February, they were buying the Octobers. That gave them plenty of time to see what could happen with this company. And lo and behold, here we go. Those things that were 3 strike are now worth $2 that were costing, I think it was 50 cents or something like that, whatever it was. And that's a pretty nice win, I would say, John. Not so bad.
6x.
6x. We'll take 6x.
Now, how many of you want to put $50 down, because a 50-cent option is $50 a piece? So if you had $500 into this, today it's worth at least $2,000, probably more like $2,200. So yeah, that's why unusual activity works. That's why you guys should all check out down below marketrebellion.com/get started. That's marketrebellion.com/get started. And you could start trading like Pete and I trade.
Yep.
All right, Pete, let's hit the next one. Bitcoin stocks. This one I think is very telling, of course, because Bitcoin moves up and down, and we know it can move up and down 5 or even 10% in a day. It's moving up today, but it's not up that much, Pete. But these stocks are ripping to the upside. You look at MicroStrategy, you look at BITX, you look at Riot Blockchain or HUT or any of these, they're all ripping to the upside today because the halving is now behind us. And according to the Wall Street Journal, this won't surprise you, Pete, Michael Saylor, the genius over at MicroStrategy that bought a whole bunch of Bitcoin, has now made $3 billion on that Bitcoin trade, and he ain't selling, but he is selling stock in MicroStrategy.
And yet the stock, John, is still up 8%, even though he's the insider selling. And is he selling for a negative reason? No. But it's a great way for him, first of all, the whole process of what he did, how he's hedged things, how he's positioned himself. Absolutely brilliant. I mean, this is like something we've never seen before. Unbelievable. Now, back in March, we were looking at MicroStrategy trading around 1900 or so, John. Today, it was around 1275. So is it the absolute top? No, but it's made a nice move to the upside. And when you look at where that stock was, if you go back even 6-8 months ago to where it's run up to, it has been all over the place, but it's been at some highs. It's pulled back a little bit, like everything for the most part once we got to April. But I think the reality is when you look at MicroStrategy, John, you've got a 20% short in there. There's still a lot of folks in there that are trying to figure out exactly how they need to position. It's an amazing move that we are seeing today. And in the face of him saying, hey, look, this is what we're doing. This is how we're doing it. They're really much more closer to an AI, but this is an unbelievable move to the upside. And Michael Saylor, how he's navigated this has been extraordinary.
Yep. And they bring him out when it's up or when it's down, more often when it's up, of course. And all he does is buy the dips, Pete. Mm-hmm. He's rarely chasing it. He's waiting for the weak hands to decide, okay, enough, and they sell, and Michael Saylor's in there buying. I mean, it's been incredible. He is one of the best traders and investors in Bitcoin and perhaps other digital assets. All right, Pete, Salesforce, you called it last week because you were talking about Benioff, Mark Benioff, and how many acquisitions he's done. Well, guess what? A stock is moving down big today because of an acquisition he is not going to do. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, it's pretty interesting, John. And obviously he had a lot of pushback from some of the investors, but this is what Salesforce does. Now, that being said, they have not been able to get this acquisition done yet. And so because of that, there's some push and back and forth and all the rest of it. But it is pretty interesting to see exactly how this whole thing is going out. And it just shows you he is very disciplined on how he makes the decisions. They're not really coming through with what, how they want to do this whole thing. By the way, John, when you look at what Salesforce has in terms of just looking at their balance sheet and everything else, this is a company that absolutely has been crushing it. And Benioff gets all the credit in the world. He's done 59 acquisitions, John. I can't remember exactly the number of them that are $1 billion plus, but they are huge. The biggest one being Slack, which was $27.7 billion. But
Wow.
that is what they do. And it doesn't mean that every one of those is going to be executed, because there's a whole process that has to be gone through. But nonetheless, it's impressive to see how the discipline is right in front of us as we're watching this transaction attempt to happen. And by the way, these kind of acquisitions are exactly why Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Citi, and all these financials, why are they doing so well? Well, because investment banking is back, and it is back in front of us in 2024 when we completely missed it in 2023. But take a look at Goldman Sachs today. Take a look at a lot of these various financials that are heavily involved. Morgan Stanley's done pretty well, but Goldman Sachs has been my favorite, John. And last week you were talking about being on Fox. I was on Fox a couple of times. I kept saying, look, Goldman Sachs, it's too cheap. It's too cheap. It's still too cheap, in my opinion.
Yeah, boy, what a run, folks. And I think there's probably a picture. We'll have to get it for next time we talk about Salesforce, of Pete and Mark Benioff together, along with the dude. Wasn't the dude there playing his guitar or something, Pete?
Yeah. Benioff's a big dude, by the way. Speaking of big dudes, Benioff is one big son of a gun. I'll tell you that right now.
6'7"?
Yeah, he might be. I'm not sure if he's quite that tall, but he's a big human being. And boy, I tell you what, I respect how that guy goes through the process and all the acquisitions that they've made that have worked. Obviously, not everyone always works, but I think Salesforce has done a magnificent job with finding the right companies, putting them within themselves, and then building them up. It's been an incredible process, and I give him all the credit in the world.
He's due a lot of that, and there's a reason it's a $180 billion company. Yeah. All right, Pete, let's take a look at Cardinal Health, CAH, because these guys are a drug distributor and they make medical laboratory products. They're cutting off, not renewing a distribution agreement with PBM, a pharmacy benefits manager named Optimum RX. And for that reason, Cardinal Health shares are getting cracked. And we all kind of understand why, because you can make all this stuff, but there are now questions about how much of it they're going to be able to move through the pipeline, because this is a pretty big, like I say, pharmacy benefits manager, or PBM, that distributes their products. The other guys, Optimum doesn't make them, they distribute them. And Cardinal Health now has elected not to renew that distribution deal.
And the problem going forward for them, John, is that's going to affect their earnings going forward. They're gonna probably, for 2025, they're going to be reduced by about 50 cents of earnings. So that's one of the reasons why I think we're seeing that pressure in the selling, because this is going to be a fairly large impact, a very large impact on their earnings going forward. How are they going to be able to make the kind of money that they were probably, everybody was looking for them to be making when it comes to the earnings and all the rest of it? It puts them in a bit of a bind. Stock down about 6%. Year to date, John, in a year where the first quarter was magnificent, April obviously has not been magnificent, but nonetheless, a lot of stocks are up significantly still this year. Not this name. Cardinal Health is exactly where it started the year right now. That's not very good when you consider the S&P, the Dow, the NASDAQ, and what we're seeing from the major indices. And this one's definitely kind of dragging along. They're not in negative territory, not yet, but they're basically flat on the year.
Yeah, losing a major distribution deal, perhaps for the right reasons. I don't know. I mean, maybe Optimum RX wanted, X amount more, and Cardinal Health just said, no, we're not playing that game. We'll give you this. Again, we don't know the reasons why that deal ended, but we do know that it's been declared publicly that it has ended. They're not renewing. All right, Pete, time for a little sports. And I know we're finally to the time when we're going to get draft day from the NFL. And I'm looking forward to it. Believe me, I can't wait.
You got to watch that Kevin Costner if you've never seen it, John. That draft day show is actually kind of fun. All the craziness and the trades and all the rest of it. And I just thought it would be kind of fun for the two of us not to take too much time on it. And then we can go to the Vikings, because I got something pretty exciting there. But when it comes to the draft, here's what I'd love to hear from you, because you know football backwards and forwards, ups and downs and everything. Played for the Chicago Bears, played a lot of different colleges. We called them Samsonite for a reason, folks. But anyway, so when it comes to the NFL and the trading, do you think this year is going? I mean, everybody's expecting to see, well, these guys are going to trade up, these guys are going to trade down, this team's going to do this team's going to do that. It could actually end up being, John, where they just stay right in line for the most part. Maybe there's a trade or two. Last year was a record-setting year for trades in the first round. So I'm throwing this out to both of us, but I'll throw it out to you. Do you think it's going to be a year where they do stand up and they do make all the trades that everybody seems to be thinking it's going to be? I mean, moving up to 5th pick, moving down to the 10th, moving 9th. Oh, I got 2 picks in the first round. We're going to go all the way up to the top 5. What do you think is going to happen actually when it comes to the time? Are we going to set another record for trading, or are people pretty satisfied with where they are? What do you think?
Well, there's a lot of talent out there. Yeah. So, granted, we've got people like you had on your sports show yesterday, Pete, Joe Alt from Notre Dame. There's only one Joe Alt in this year's draft. There isn't a second one. There are other really good players, but there's only one Joe Alt. As far as quarterbacks, you and I have gone back and forth. Are there other Caleb Williams? Hell yes. There's Michael Penix. There's even, Bo Nix. I mean, I'd love to see those two side by side, Pete, and see, okay, which one really wins out, because I don't think there's that much difference in the top quarterbacks, even with Penix injuries that have obviously no injuries while he was at Washington that kept him out of a game, but prior when he was at Indiana and so forth. So that's the wrap on him, if there's a wrap. But his mechanics and everything else, my God, I mean, there are some great quarterbacks available, J.J. McCarthy, Daniels, all of these guys. So I would not trade up, Pete. Honestly, I wouldn't, because we've all seen number 1 picks fall flat on their face. Ryan Lee. We've seen that. So he came out highly touted, barely in the league 2 years. And I think that a lot of this is you got to also manage your payroll, Pete, because not just for the owner, but because NFL rules, you can't exceed that salary cap. And so I would much rather have my 2 first-round picks rather than going out and getting a free agent that I'm going to have to spend $60 million for and break my salary cap room. So I would, if I were a GM, I would not be trading. I want all those picks because I got them for 4 years for next to nothing compared to a free agent.
So true. And I think that's exactly where I stand too. I think there is going to be a trade or two. I don't think it's going to be as many as people think. People are probably estimating right now, maybe there's 6 or 8 trades in the first round itself, maybe. And then after that, maybe another 15 or 20. But those are the later rounds anyway. But people are focused on the first 2 rounds mostly. But I would say this. If there's one trade that actually kind of makes some sense to me, it might be the Chargers, who have the pick number 5, John. And the only reason I bring that one up is Jim Harbaugh's there. They've already got their quarterback. They love Herbert. He thinks the world of him. So what he needs, maybe it's an offensive lineman, maybe it's whatever, but if somebody wants to trade up, they're probably not going for that. They're probably going for some quarterback, depending on how things go and how the first 2 or 3 picks look. So I would look for the Chargers to be one of those teams where they could trade down and maybe pick up a couple of picks, Minnesota Vikings or whomever, if that we start to see some of those trades. But I don't think it's going to be as crazy as last year. If it is, it's going to be the most fun draft ever. But I just don't know that it will. I think they've kind of lined up and it's like, all right, here's who's number 1, Caleb. Here's who's number 2, just all the way down. I think those top 3 or 4 will be the big influence unless somebody makes a big move to get up in there. And I'm not sure I see that. So I think maybe at number 5. All right. Minnesota Vikings, John, I got this one for you because I thought that you'd think this was pretty interesting because I did. I used to work at NBC Sports for a while when I was living in Connecticut and doing all the fast money stuff and all the stuff back in the day. But I worked a little bit with NBC Sports as well, John, and I worked with Mike Florio. Now, Mike Florio, one of the brilliant guys, Pro Football Talk. People see him all the time on TV or radio, or they, however they either take in, whatever. But he had something really interesting that he put out there the other day that, I don't, knowing that it's Mike Florio, I think it actually is meaningful. So here's what he said. He goes, Brady, I believe, wants the phone to ring before the night or after the draft. And he's talking about Tom Brady. And he said, here are the teams that I think Tom wants to play for: Raiders, Patriots, Broncos, Vikings, or Washington. Now, it's not going to be Washington. Washington's going to take their pick, right? Drake May or whatever. And then there's the Patriots. Does he go to the Patriots again? Does Tom Brady really do that? No. I mean, he could. But could he go to the Minnesota Vikings? I mean, that makes a very interesting thought, to go forward, is who do the Vikings pick? Because they're in a position where they need a quarterback bad. They got nobody. Sam Darnold is their best guy right now of two, and Sam Darnold's not very good. So where does that put them? And do you think Tom Brady's coming back? Because all things, here's what he said. He wants to roll the dice for 1 year, and he is considering the fact of a team that might have interest. He might have interest as well. And this is despite the fact that he's got that contract with Fox. So Brady is out there saying it's possible. Florio's out there trying to name the teams. What do you think about this, John? Does Brady really come back? And if so, who's the right team? Because he better have a good offensive line. He doesn't need to get hurt at 45 or whatever he is.
Right. Well, the Vikings, as long as they have that receiver, Pete, Jefferson,
yep. Mm-hmm.
Brady was lucky enough, smart enough to work with Belichick to get Randy Moss out there from the Vikings, when Randy was done, right? Randy's done, and all of a sudden they talk him into coming out, and all he does is crush it with Tom just pitching him the ball. Can you imagine Justin Jefferson getting that ball from Tom Brady? There's no doubt in my mind he can still play. And is that the spot? You mentioned once before, Pete, that what if, what if they call him after the draft and say, tell you what, Tom, keep yourself in that great shape. Come on by every once in a while. And just in case Aaron Rodgers isn't able to play the whole season, we want you here. Could that happen? Oh my God. I mean, if that happened, the NFL, it's the only thing that could be bigger than Taylor Swift, Pete. Would be Brady coming back as the quarterback because Aaron Rodgers went down again. And you and I both hope he doesn't. He's a friend. He's a good guy. I like him. We watched him play at Cal and, of course, up at Green Bay and all of 4 or 5 plays for the Jets so far. So I hope that doesn't happen. But that would be, if he isn't playing for somebody, Pete, I would not be surprised to see the Jets be able to say, okay, this is a piece that we need, and we're going to bring him into camp. I'd love that.
The toughest thing I think for me, John, would be this. So you go through the draft. Now you might want Tom Brady, but do you have room for Tom Brady? That's going to be the other side of this whole thing. I mean, I know there's ways to manipulate money and everything else, and that's what probably any of those teams would have to do, because I don't think Tom's just going to come out there just for fun either. But It is interesting to hear him talk about he's keeping himself in shape. He would be ready. Maybe it's a late season ready, like you were talking. I mean, maybe somebody says, hey, look, Tom, first 8 weeks of the season, 10 weeks of the season, the heck with it, man. We'll navigate our way. But if we're somewhere close and blah, 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 maybe he said he's keeping himself in shape, which is pretty damn interesting. It seems like Tom is not ready to hang up the cleats just yet, John. And we'll see. But that makes the draft that much more interesting, right? Because that kind of changes the dynamic a little bit as well for those that want to trade and all the rest of it. Could be interesting.
Oh, yeah. It should be, like I say, for you and me, that's bigger than Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
But getting Taylor 1 year, 23, and getting Tom Brady in 24, forget about it. the NFL crushes every other sporting event in the world. But we'll see how that plays out, Pete.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us, folks. Make sure you check out itsnotanoption.com because we do have that free book. You can claim your copy at itsnotanoption.com. There it is right there on the screen. Make sure you check it out. Yeah, right down here, right there. Itsnotanoption.com. Great book. #1 selling business book of 2024. Check it out. And Pete and I will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Bang.